All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar today. We're going to kick off here in a second. We've got a lot of great stuff to cover today, but I'm going to give just 1 minute to let people join on, and then we are going to get rolling. So before we kick off, I'd love to know what your excitement level is for revenue generating podcasts as we're waiting for some folks to join. So if you are here and you're like, man, I cannot wait to generate revenue through a podcast, then go ahead and put a 1 in the comments. If you're here and you're like, I'm kind of on the fence, give me a 2 in the comments. And if you're just here because your boss told you to be, then you can put a 3 in the comments, and hopefully we can change your mind on the value of starting a podcast that generates revenue as we go along here. I'm also going to put some questions. Jake, yeah, thanks for joining. Super excited to start generating revenue. I love it. I'm also going to put a couple questions in the chat here that I'd love for you to answer. This is going to help me tailor this a little bit more to you. Michelle, thanks for joining in. Super excited to have you. So if you don't mind, as we're going through this presentation, answering these couple questions, and then as we go through, I can tailor this presentation and make it more meaningful. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Joseph Lewin, and I've spent the last 10 years growing businesses in the trenches. I've worked for in-house at a engineering software company. We also sold a manufacturing software to industrial marketers. So we were selling to marketers. And then I worked at an agency where we were working with professional services companies, and we specifically sold podcasting services. And then I've also launched a couple small agencies as well. Now, it's important that you know, as we're diving in, I've helped launch over 30 shows that have driven millions in revenue for my clients. And so the things I'm sharing with you today, these aren't theory. These aren't, I think that these could work. I have personally driven a lot of revenue through podcasting, and I've helped clients do the same. And I'm excited to share that with you. Now, today I'm going to go a little bit fast through some of this stuff, because what I hate about joining webinars is when you join and it's just a veiled sales pitch and you don't really have anything to take away. And so what I can promise you today is we're going to cover some actual meat. And then I do have some special offers for you from me for Sell Through Social. And then my partner in this webinar, Video Scale, also has some things. So we're going to give you some special offers at the end, but we're going to really give you a lot of meat. So buckle in. Awesome. B2B to professional services, tech security, service marketing. Awesome. Yeah, that is, Michael, you are right in the right spot to be generating clients and potentially helping your clients generate revenue through podcasts as well. Last thing I'll say before we really dive in is, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm going to mostly answer questions at the end, but if you put it there, we can come back and make sure we don't lose our spot here. All right, so you've probably already tried generating revenue in a bunch of different ways for your business: building a great product or service and hoping people refer you, networking, leads groups, cold calling, inbound events, and you can drive revenue through all these things. But the challenge that I've seen, especially the larger your deals are, the more difficult that these become and the less predictable that they come. And so what podcasting lets you do is be more in control of your revenue. I'm booking conversations with decision makers in a couple hours per week without making a single cold call. And I'm going to teach you the ultimate cheat code for creating sustainable growth for your business by starting a podcast that generates revenue for your agency. And this is going to be the most valuable 30 minutes of your year so far, because in the next really 25 minutes now, I'm going to show you how to develop a show format, identify a show topic, source guests, produce the show, and generate revenue. Now, obviously, in 25 minutes, we can't go super deep into all these, but I'm going to give you some things that if you think about them and you implement what we're talking about today, you're going to be able to launch a show much faster, and you're going to be able to get to revenue much faster through these methods. And then the final thing I'm going to share with you is a bonus secret method to start your show in less than 30 days. Because the biggest issue I see with starting a podcast is actually launching it. Kayla, thanks for joining us, Sacramento. Awesome. Love it. Okay, so if you're ready to start generating revenue through your show, let's dive in. Now, the first two things I want to address, these are things I hear all the time, the two elephants in the room. The first one is my prospects are different than yours. They wouldn't be interested in being on an interview or being on a show. And the second one is I don't know what to talk about because I don't have anything interesting to say on a show. So I want to address these up front so that you can really dive in for the rest of the episode. All right, so here's a few of the many roles and titles that my clients have had as guests in their shows. CEOs, CROs, COOs, CISOs. I won't read through the whole list, but these are across industries from engineering, startups, med device companies, biotech, consulting company, life sciences, cybersecurity, radar detection, selling into prison facilities. So I've had clients that have gotten high-level decision-making titles on their show. And so unless you're selling into the NSA or some regulated industry in the government, I can almost guarantee you that there are people in your industry who want to talk and share their expertise, and you can get them to be guests on your show. As for the second one, you don't have anything to say. Have you ever talked with a stranger about their job? Have you ever had a conversation with a stranger about their job? And were you able to carry on a conversation with them even if it wasn't your area of expertise? My guess is yes. And how do you do that? By asking good questions, by being curious, by digging into their expertise. And so if you treat your show more like a journalist, if you act like a journalist, if you're curious, then you're able to talk about something where you don't have expertise. I personally hosted or co-hosted shows in engineering, and I'm not an engineer. I've co-hosted episodes in sales, and even though I'm become more of an expert in sales, at the time I wasn't. I've co-hosted shows for cybersecurity, and I don't know anything about cybersecurity, but I'm able to ask good questions and dig into that. And so if you're able to ask good questions, you don't have to be an expert. In fact, sometimes it's an advantage because you're able to ask much more interesting questions that way. All right, so now it's time to talk about the most important thing to nail down before preparing to launch your show. If you take away one thing from our presentation today, this is really key, and that's what is your goal? When people launch a show, I find that there's three primary reasons that they would launch their show, and most people try to do all three at the same time. That would be building your own personal authority, growing an audience, or generating revenue. Now, your show over time can produce all three results, but you really have to pick which one of those three things is your primary goal because it completely changes the format of your show and the topics that you choose. And we're going to dive into that. So if your goal is short-term revenue, like you want to have cash flow in the next 3 to 6 months, and really I would even say anything under a year, then you really want to focus on, focus on starting conversations with decision makers. The more that I've been in sales and the more I've worked with sales people, the more I realize that it's less about generating leads and it's more about just talking to the right people at the right time. If you're able to talk to more decision makers at your target accounts, more people of influence, and focus on starting conversations with them, that drives revenue. So if you want to drive revenue, focus on starting conversations. If you have great cash flow, you're happy with where your revenue is at and your revenue engine, but you're really wanting to scale up over the long haul. You're looking more like, hey, over the next 18 to 24 months, we want to build our brand. We want to be much more recognized. Then I would say focus on audience growth, building an audience and focusing on really connecting with an audience. And then the third one is building authority. So if you want to grow your personal reputation and stand out in the market, so think of like Marcus Sheridan or Donald Miller from StoryBrand, or Gary Vee, or Alex Hormozy. Those are all people who have built their personal authority separate from the brand. So if you want to build your personal authority in the market, then focus on thought leadership. And like I said, running a show, you're kind of going to get all three of these over time, but where you focus first is really going to dictate how fast you drive revenue through your show. Okay, so that becomes really important. So, in the chat, if there's one of those three things that stands out to you more, I'd love to hear what it is. So audience growth, building your authority, or driving revenue, then go ahead and put that in the chat. Because that's going to really dictate the decisions that you make through these 5 lessons we're going to talk through. Okay, so the 5 lessons to launch a revenue generating podcast are developing a show format, identifying a show topic, sourcing guests, producing your show, generating revenue, and then the secret bonus quick start method I'm going to share with you at the end. All right, so developing a show format. Your show format sets the stage. If you choose the right format based on your goal, whether that's revenue growth, audience growth, or building authority, that's what really sets the stage for success. So show format examples would be guest interview, guest conversations, commentary, point of view, story-driven, and news. Some of these are sort of self-explanatory, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in a second. The one that's not quite as self-explanatory might be the story-driven one. So that's going to be either real or even fictional stories that illustrate a point that get people to think a little bit differently about a topic or to solidify an idea. So show format examples for audience growth would be having influential guests on your show. So that might be booking Gary Vee or Seth Godin or people like that onto your show. Now, as far as driving revenue, that usually doesn't really help you that much. But if you start having influential guests on, you're going to start getting some people following you because they like those people. Another way to grow an audience is co-hosted commentary. So that's to have 2 co-hosts that are on every single time, and they're having commentary on a topic or things that are going on in the industry. Point of view conversation, again, that's going to be 2 people from your team or a partner company that are having those conversations together. The story-driven podcasts, these are a lot harder to pull off, and I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but if your company is really great at storytelling, you can create more of like a serialized podcast. Like if you think of Serial or one of those shows where they're telling this story and they're bringing in sound effects and everything like that, those can be great for audience growth, but it's a lot harder to pull that off. And then news, that would be what's going on in the industry, what's trending in the industry, and having 2 people from your team talk about what's happening. Show format examples to build authority, I would say focus on one of these 3. So if you as an individual want to grow your authority, having commentary on trending topics where you are just talking about trending topics, things that are going on. So like going back to Marcus Sheridan, I've seen him talk a lot about AI recently, and he's giving his commentary and growing his authority in the space of AI for marketing specifically. Point of view, that's just sharing your unique perspective on the industry, your unique way of doing things. And then news, what are trending topics that are going on that you can share your perspective on? And then finally, show formats examples for revenue growth. This is where you're treating your podcast as really a biz dev or relationship building tool. This is where most of my clients start. This is where I recommend most of them start, because who doesn't want to generate more revenue in the next 3 to 6 months, 9 months? And then kind of focusing on the other ones as you grow. And the way that you do that is by focusing on guest interviews or guest conversations. It's a little bit of a nuance, but guest interviews is more of an interview like a journalist would do. Guest conversations allows you to share more of your perspective. And so if you do have expertise in the space, treating it more like a fireside chat can be really valuable and help you grow your reputation alongside your guest. All right, lesson number 2, identifying a show topic. Your show topic drives guest interest and audience growth. And so you really want to pick the topic that drives your goal. And this really becomes important because if you get off on your topic, you're really not going to be successful at what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to build authority, your topic needs to be something that you want to be known as the recognized authority. That sounds obvious, but the more focused you can be on a topic that you want to be known as the authority in, the better. Now, I know there's a lot of agencies that are joining us today, so it could be what you have expertise in as an agency. So if you're a web dev agency, maybe it's UI UX. If you're an SEO agency, it could be about SEO. If you do video production, it could be about how to make better videos. So that would be an example. But then on the flip side, you might also want to be focusing more on a niche market. So maybe you sell to cybersecurity companies and do marketing for them. Well, talking about how cybersecurity companies can grow might be a better thing to be known for. So you really want to think through that. Then we have audience growth and revenue growth. I actually kind of laid these out in a slide, but I got ahead of myself. So we kind of covered this, but these are different ways to approach the topic. You can just share your expertise. You can talk about industry news with commentary or best practices around a topic that you want to be known for. When it comes to audience growth, it's really important to think of who's the audience you want to grow. Who are the people that you want paying attention to what you're doing. If you want to grow that audience, the topic needs to be something that your audience cares about. And again, this sounds obvious, but it's so easy to focus on what your company is interested in talking about rather than what the audience is going to be interested in hearing. Some ways to do this would be co-hosted commentary on industry news, best practices, stories, or trends. I'll just use a cybersecurity example. If you're selling to cybersecurity companies primarily, you might want to grow an audience of cybersecurity marketers. And so what you focus on might be a lot more geared towards education around the things they need to know in cybersecurity, not necessarily marketing in general. So you really want to think through who's the audience, what topic is going to connect with them. All right, and then finally, if you want to generate short-term revenue, you really want to focus, and this is going to be the big thing that I focus on personally, that I help clients with, is focusing on your guest and their expertise. Because at the end of the day, if you want to build a really high quality relationship, if you're able to reach out to a guest and get them to share their expertise, they're going to like you. And we're going to dig a little bit more into that later. And then you want to get guest commentary on things that are going on, industry news, best practices, trends, things like that. And so, yeah, choosing which topic really depends on what you want to do. All right, lesson number 3, sourcing guests. How to get your prospect to say heck yes to your outreach. Okay, a couple ways to source guests. If people are already putting themselves out there, then they're going to be a lot more likely to come on your show. And so an easy place to start is, your existing prospect list, people you're already talking to. This is some of the lowest hanging fruit for driving revenue. One of my clients, I'll talk about it in a little bit, closed a $700,000 deal that's now turned into over $1 million deal from his first episode of his first show. And it's because he had a prospect on who had gone dark, and then he re-engaged that prospect by inviting him on the show. So that's very low hanging fruit. Another low hanging fruit for driving revenue would be current customers or past customers, re-engaging past customers or being able to upserve your current clients. Other place to source guests would be LinkedIn, just being active on LinkedIn, the news feed, all that. Using Sales Navigator. I personally, and a lot of my clients use Sales Navigator to find exactly the right people and invite them on the show. You could look at other podcasts, people who do speaking, in-person events. Those are some great places to start sourcing guests. All right. Your ideal customers love to talk about themselves, their ideas, and share their expertise. And so that's where, if your goal is revenue growth and you focus on, got a good question here. So how do you get your potential clients on the show if they've gone dark? This actually, what I'm sharing describes exactly how to do that. And it's, if the show topic is about audience growth or it's about your area of expertise, you're going to be a lot less likely to get somebody to be interested to join you as a guest. Whereas if you focus on their area of expertise and what they want to talk about, they're way more likely to just say, heck yeah, I want to talk about my area of expertise. So in that example of the $700,000 deal, my client sells a very high-end radar system. None of his potential customers want to talk about radar. They don't care about it. They secure prison facilities and critical infrastructure and things like that. And so the topic that they're super interested in talking about is drone detection and drone mitigation. So this client of his had gone dark, and instead of inviting him on a show to talk about radar, he had reached out and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the show that I'm launching to talk about your drone mitigation program." And 5 minutes after reaching out to this prospect who had gone dark for 2 months, the guy responded yes, came on his show, and they closed that $700,000 deal in 3 weeks. So your ideal customers love to talk about themselves. Focus on their area of expertise. Be a catalyst for your ideal customers' ideas, and they're going to be much more likely to say yes. People love talking about themselves. They love talking about their ideas. When you're a catalyst for their ideas, they're going to love you for it and be interested in coming on your show. So personalization gets better results, but don't overthink it. It's still a numbers game. And so if your topic is right and your prospects or your customers or your industry influencers love talking about that topic, when you reach out, you don't have to be overly personalized because they want to talk about the topic. And so, you can see this is super simple outreach here. Hi, John. I produce a show called Outbound. The focus is helping people who do business development build deeper relationships with their ideal customers. Would you be open to joining me as a guest? This wasn't over personalized, but it's a topic that this particular prospect loves to talk about. And he said, yeah, sure. Sounds like fun. One more note on this is with personalization, if you really want to have somebody on your show, it's like super important to you to build a relationship with them. Take 15, 20, 30 minutes and create a very personalized outreach. Listen to a couple podcasts they've been on, whatever. But if you're trying to book a show a week or multiple shows a week, at a certain point, you're going to have to scale your outreach. And so just keep it simple and get more people booked on your show. Outreach gets a bad rap, but it doesn't have to be a dirty word. When you make your outreach about them, you make it about what they want, their desires, their goals, same kinds of things we learn about in marketing and sales. When you make it about them, they're going to want to come on. If you make it about you and your company, good luck getting people to say yes to coming on your show. When you make it about them, you can think of it like this. You're giving them free press, and there's actual monetary value in what you're doing. People pay a lot of money to podcast booking services to get booked on shows, and you're reaching out to give them a platform for free. And so if they say no, it's truly their loss at that point. They're missing out. All right, keep it simple, detach from the outcome, and you're going to have much better outreach results. All right, I'm going to move a little bit quicker here just so that I don't keep you too much longer than that 30 minutes. Produce the show. So a couple things you want to keep in mind is you need some equipment. You don't need to get crazy with it. I have a crazy condenser mic that I've used in the past, but right now I'm just using this lapel mic because it works decently well, and I use it for recording off screen as well. You could also get a Blue Yeti USB mic, something like that. Spend $100, $150, and you can get something pretty decent. Your background, this is actually really important. I definitely recommend don't blur your background. Don't use some weird, fake background. Spend $50, $100, design a wall that you're able to, turn your desk around like what I have here, or just use a blank wall. But whatever the case is, clean up your background and don't use the background blur. And then there's a question of, okay, do you self-produce this show or do you outsource production? So if you're going to produce it yourself, here's a couple of things that you can use. Editing software for beginners, you've got Descript. It's a pretty easy way to use it. You can get a lot done with it with somebody who's not, necessarily a video editing expert. I started using DaVinci Resolve. I used to use Adobe Premiere for more advanced editing. As far as recording software, I've used Riverside and StreamYard. They both work pretty well. Either of those work pretty good. Okay. Outsource production. So my partner in this webinar, Video Scale, is awesome for outsource production. And since there's a lot of you on here who run agencies, Video Scale is an awesome option for doing outsourced video editing, either for your own work or for client work. What's awesome about working with Video Scale is that they have set monthly pricing, so it makes it really easy to focus on you record the episode. After the first 2 or 3 episodes, they're going to really understand what you're looking for and be able to just pump these out with very little effort from your team. I've personally worked with Video Scale to produce podcasts, including the Outbound, which is the one you see on the screen here. They do an awesome job, and they're able to pump out stuff without breaking the bank that lets you get that outsourced and off your team. Video Scale has a special offer I'm going to talk about a little bit later when we wrap up here. All right, lesson number 5, generate revenue. Now, this could be a whole probably 3-hour workshop just on this part of it, but I want to share a couple nuggets that I've learned about actually generating revenue through the show. So first of all, high dollar deals are built on trust. I have yet to find very many service-based businesses that are selling $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 deals based off of a cold call. And the bigger the company gets, actually the harder some of that stuff becomes. And so, yeah, this is my client that I was talking about. He closed a $700,000 deal from his first episode of his first show. And the reason is that one conversation can change everything. And so to me, I don't look at podcasting as lead generation. I look at it as a way to have really meaningful conversations with the right people, with decision makers, industry influencers, and folks like that. So an example of how to generate revenue is I had Bob Berg, the best-selling author of the book The Go-Giver, on my show in March. Never met him before. After the show wraps up, he says, "Man, you need to meet my marketing lady, Kim." He makes a warm intro to Kim. She ends up becoming a client of mine, brings me on to help launch a show for Bob, and now has introduced me to a bunch of other people in her network. And so by adding value to Bob, making him look good on my show, he ends up making a warm intro, even though we had just met. And then when you do this consistently and you're running shows over and over again, you end up getting pulled into new networks of people. So this group on the right side is from Minneapolis. I've never been there before and haven't met most of these people in person, but I've been pulled into their community by having a bunch of folks on my show. Same with the group from Nashville, the Go-Giver community, my local community in Cincinnati. So when you look on starting conversations and building relationships through your show, that's how you drive revenue. And the crazy thing is you end up driving revenue faster when you focus on the other person. And you do that by adding value to them. And I'm not just, it's cool to give them some resources for free and stuff like that, but I'm talking about going beyond that by thinking during the interview, what can I do that's going to make this person's life easier? Is there somebody in my network they need to know that I could introduce them to, and things like that? If you let the deals come to you, and again, my clients are seeing revenue come in and definitely pipeline within the first 3 to 6 months of launching a show when they're taking this approach. All right, so the bonus method, the quick start method for starting your show, that's going to be to start a live show. So instead of pre-recording, post-producing, and then launching your show, instead you just get started and do it as a live show. It feels really intimidated, but I promise it's actually way easier than you think. And it lets you start your show much, much faster. Then you run that show for 3 to 6 months live so that you can nail down your format, your topic, identify the right guest profile, and then create social content. If you start this way, it lets you scale up and move much, much faster. All of my clients I've worked with on starting a live show start within 3 to 4 weeks, whereas a typical podcast launch ends up being 3 to 9 months just because it gets bogged down in all the details. A live show is easy to start, it's easy to maintain, low startup costs, and then it lets you learn before you commit. So this way you could test different types of guests, test different show formats, and not have to commit as solidly to any of those before you launch your show. And then also, if you run your show for 3 or 4 weeks and you say, I hate doing a show, I don't like interviewing people, I'm not into this, then you haven't sunk all of these costs into getting your show up and going. All right, so we're going to get to questions here in a second, but the only thing left now is to get going. I have about 2 more minutes here, and then open up the floor for questions. All right, so there's 3 paths that you can take from today's webinar. The first one is do nothing with what you learned today, and just keep going status quo. The second one is you can take the information I've shared with you, you can start mapping all of that stuff out on your own, and you can launch. The third one is to leverage my experience and let me help you dial in your revenue generating show. All right, so there's 3 ways that I work with clients, and this is on a much more hands-on basis. So there's training done with you and done for you. These start at $12,000 for a year engagement, where I'm going to really walk alongside you. We're going to do a hands-on launch. I'm going to really work with you to get your show off the ground, help you understand how to do this stuff, and work through a lot of it with you. So if you're interested in that, I am going to post a link to my calendar, and we can chat about any of those bigger options. But for anybody who's joined today, I'm happy to give you a free 30-minute planning session. So if you want to just talk about a show, you want some help thinking through your ideas to see if you're on the right track, you can use the link I just posted in the chat there to book a conversation with me, and I will share any and all information you want in that 30 minutes to help you get going, whether we work together or not. And then finally, I do have a bonus offer. Since you guys are a bunch of agency folks here, a lot of you could figure this out on your own, but I've just created a bunch of resources that are going to make it a lot easier for you to get started. And so for anybody who's joining today, I'm offering knowledge and accountability with this self-starter show launch. I've helped a bunch of folks do this on their own, where I'm sending you training materials, videos, resources, templates, and then giving 4 30-minute sessions to really help you kick off and launch your show. Normally it's $1,500, but if you sign up using this link I'm going to post in the chat before the end of the day tomorrow, I will give that to you for $997 instead. You post that here, but you have to schedule that by to the end of the day tomorrow. So yeah, if you're self-motivated, you're really good at running things on your own, this is a great option. I've had a bunch of clients that have done this, and we've helped them launch a show, and they're generating revenue a lot faster than doing it on their own. All right, final special offer before we dive into answering any and all of your questions is outsource video production for agencies through VideoScale. So again, I've worked with VideoScale myself. They are awesome. It's a set monthly price that makes it super easy to generate revenue from your show. That starts under $1,000 a month for video editing, and you basically get a block of subscription editing for that price. And so that's going to help you launch your show, edit your show, and a lot of times you're even going to have some availability after that to work on other types of video editing that you need done. So if you use the promo code podcasts, you'll get 20% off your first month through 11/31. And then they have a 14-day money-back guarantee. And so if you aren't happy with the service, which I can't imagine, then they will give you your money back for the first 14 days. So I'm going to post a link to their calendar, and you can also go to VideoScale's website. We're going to send an email with a recording to this video and all of these links as well after we wrap up here. All right, with that, thank you so much for joining in, and I'm happy to, oops, sorry, that's up on that slide there, double view. Happy to answer some questions here. So I'm going to start by taking a look at some of these questions that we've gotten. But if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'm happy to stay on for a little while and answer these questions. All right, so Michael Sebastian said, how is podcast, I could actually pull it up on the screen. How is podcast relevant to us as a specialized B2B full service sales and marketing agency if our clients are tech companies, commercial real estate, and other varied industries? Okay, so there's 2 ways that you can look at this question. One is for you generating business for your company. And so to me, if I'm in your shoes, and I have been in the shoes of being at an agency that's similar, I would focus on interviewing guests at your ideal customer companies. If you focus on ideal clients and you interview them, you're going to build much deeper relationships much faster. the higher end your service is, the more value there is in being seen as a trusted advisor in the industry, as an industry expert, and as part of the community. And podcasting is an awesome way to do that. So, yeah, I've worked in the with tech companies, specifically like tech startup companies, high tech engineering firms, and helped launch shows for them, med tech companies, and all of them have benefited from using this and booking clients. So the second way to do it is if you offer podcasting as a service yourself. And so, if you launch the show and then you want to then help your clients launch shows, it's a huge revenue generator. At a previous agency I worked at, we were working with clients $10,000 to $15,000 a month, and the primary thing we were doing was generating, helping them with their podcasts, and then using that to generate other high quality content. So that's a couple different ways to think about it. And if you want help thinking through how you can do this as an agency yourself, I'd be happy to chat through that with you as well. Okay, Jake asked, how quick can you realistically get a show launched and start generating revenue? Okay, so most of my clients, if we're launching with a live show, 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to have kicked off your show, from kickoff to your show launch. To me, speed is everything, and that's why I love starting with the live show. I personally, when I started this business, generated revenue with this method in my first 30 days running my show. I've had clients that generate revenue that quickly. How fast you generate revenue really depends on your sales cycle and how dialed in your product is. If you have a product offering or a service offering that's very dialed in and you have a ton of experience doing it, you're going to drive revenue much faster. Like I would be confident 3 to 6 months you're going to have had revenue come in. The less dialed in your service is, the longer it's going to take, because it's just not as clear. As far as if you're launching as a traditional podcast, I would give 3 to 6 months to launch a show like that, just because it takes a lot more time to figure out the details and you want to do some research upfront. Do I have a recommended podcast hosting service for audio platforms? I have used several, but Spotify's, I believe it's Anchor FM. Is that right? Yes. Spotify's is Anchor FM, and I have used that, and I would recommend starting there. I can even just post a link here real quick in the chat. So this would be a good one to start with here. Also, YouTube has started doing podcasting. I would recommend really focusing on, first of all, video podcasts. Don't do audio only, and then focus on how you can grow on YouTube and on LinkedIn with your social clips, because the platforms like Spotify, until you become one of the top podcasters, you don't really get promotion. And so if you think of YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever your ideal customers are hanging out as the main place where you're driving listens and downloads, you're going to get a lot more value through that. And then if you posted a comment earlier, it's just me on here. I don't have anybody driving through. So if you have one, go ahead and repost your question here. I'd be happy to answer. Yeah, I do recommend micro videos, again, depending on your goal. I mean, the faster you want to drive revenue, the more shows you should have. And so it really becomes a balance between how many shows do you want to get out there so you can have more conversations, and then how much do you want each individual show to do for you. So for me personally, I've focused more on having more shows first, and then doing the micro clips as my show grows. But for a lot of clients, if they're doing one show a week or even one show every other week, you can get a ton of mileage by cutting clips from your show and posting those on LinkedIn. It helps you grow your show much, much faster when you're cutting those clips. And then other ways you could use that content is, blog posts written off of the content that you generated. You could do slide decks. You could do on LinkedIn, the carousels. You can pull paid ads. We've had clients do that. So there's lots of ways you can use the content that you generate. Awesome. I'll give a second here for any more questions, and then I have a few things that I know people ask. So I'm going to start going through a few FAQs here to give you guys a chance if you have any other questions. So one thing that I hear all the time is I hate being on camera. And so a lot of people get really concerned about being on camera. Really the only remedy for that is just to do it more. And I know that's maybe a little bit disconcerting, but to be honest, nobody's really a natural at being on video. In fact, some of the most charismatic people I know are the worst at being on video because they're used to interacting with somebody on the other side. And when they don't have that, it's really difficult. And so the only answer is just to practice. That's why I really like starting with guest interviews more than sharing just standing talking head videos, because it's a lot easier when you're able to practice being on camera by talking to somebody else. And then the other thing is, if you hate being on camera, but you realize this is something that'd be really helpful, then we should work together, because I can definitely help you work through that. I'm really good at helping clients become more comfortable on camera faster. A live show seems, this is another question I get all the time. A live show seems so intimidating, and don't feel comfortable. Is that really a viable option for me? So with the live show, it's funny because people do get very intimidated by it. I had recorded probably 50 podcast episodes or more myself when I got invited to go on my first live show, and I was extremely intimidated by it. I had a pit in my stomach. So I know very well how that feels. But then I did it and I was like, wow, that felt basically like being on a Zoom call with somebody else. So you're going to be really scared and intimidated going up to it. But once you've done the first one or two, I think it's actually easier and less intimidating than doing anything else. So if you can get on a Zoom call and you can talk with somebody, then you can run a live show. A couple other things here that I'll share that I hear all the time is, do I have to do cold outreach to make this method successful? You don't. It really just depends on if you want to break into new networks that you're not in already versus really growing the network that you already have. And so once you get going, especially, it's really easy to book people on your show based on things you're already doing. So you go to an in-person event, you meet somebody, you invite them on your show. You have them on your show, you ask them for referrals to other potential guests. And all of a sudden you start booking out guests without having to hardly even ask people. But if you really want to break into a new network, you have an idea that you could sell into a new market you haven't really sold into before, that's where cold outreach really becomes valuable. And then another thing that a lot of clients do is combine this with in-person events. And so running a show, a podcast, or a live show in conjunction with live events is extremely helpful, because you can both run the show and get the value out of that, but then leverage that to book in-person meetings at events you're going to. So here's an example. You're going to an in-person event in let's just say you're going to like Inbound or something, and it's 3 months away. You could start looking for people who you know are going to be there, either because they're speaking at the event, or you just do some research and figure out who's going to be there. You invite that person to come on a show before the event, and then what you're looking to do after the show is recorded is book a conversation with that person at the in-person event. That way you're having lunch with them, or you're having coffee or dinner or whatever, rather than just hoping you brush shoulders with them when you get there. And then at the event, you're meeting people, you meet somebody who's awesome, but they're not quite at the spot where it makes sense to schedule a discovery call or something like that. You invite that person to come on a show. And now you've met them at the event, but you're solidifying that after the fact. Awesome. So yeah, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So definitely love to talk with you. So book a call with me. Love to help you think through your show and help you get this kicked off. If you want to launch a live show, I'd love to help you with that. And okay, I did get one question here. Any tips or tricks to convert the guest after their episode? That question is a little bit complicated to ask and answer in like 30 seconds. But the main thing is just the more that you understand your ideal customers by asking them great questions, the more that you can speak to pain points and problems they have and naturally turn it into a sales conversation. So what I mean by that is, okay, I'll give a specific example. I had a CEO of a local, I want to say they're probably a $30 million a year IT company, a managed services company, on my show. I interviewed him about ESOPs, so employee owned stock option programs, I think is what it's called. He's super passionate about it. We talk about that through the whole episode. We end the live, and then we're in the studio together, not being recorded. And that's really what you're looking for, right? You get this 5, 10, 15-minute window that's already booked on their calendar. And now you get to ask them whatever you want. And so what I did is I just said, hey, I'm working on this kind of new approach to business development with folks that are like your company. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions as I'm developing this so I can make it better? And he said yes. So I started asking him the pain questions that clients I work with feel. And he's like, yeah, I resonate with that. That makes sense. And he goes, well, man, maybe you should talk to our marketing person. Then I ask him some more questions, and I'm just being curious. I'm really genuinely basically doing market research with him, not trying to sell him, not trying to pitch him, just trying to understand what they're actually dealing with and see if I'm on the right track. And then basically he says, yeah, we have this pain, we have this problem. There's somebody on our team I think actually could be good at that. And then my favorite question to ask is just, man, would it make sense to schedule a call to see if I could help you guys do that? And then it's not this heavy pitch. I'm not making this massive assumption. I'm not trying to push them. I'm just genuinely asking, being curious. And that particular example turned into a discovery call with him and the president of his company. And we're still working on that deal and hopefully moving forward on that one. And so to me, if you approach it with curiosity in the post interview and you focus on asking questions to help you understand the customer better, some of those are going to naturally turn into a discovery call. And then sometimes it helps them understand what you do better, and they'll be able to refer you to other people more effectively. The only other thing I'd say on that is just be careful not to pitch after the show. There's probably been 2 or 3 times out of 50 episodes where it made sense for me to directly pitch, where it's just too obvious. And I'm like, oh man, with everything you said today, this is what we do. I think we could really help you. Would it make sense to schedule a call? And they're like, cool, yeah. But most of the time, if you take a much softer approach, you actually close deals faster, and you have much better chance of that person referring other people to you. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Like I said, I'd love talking to you. Definitely book a call with me. I'd love to do that free 30-minute strategy session with you. If you're ready to launch your show, I'd love to work with you. Definitely check out Video Scale. Such an awesome service. They're great people there. And so let me actually just, last thing, I'm going to post their website in here so you guys can have it. And with that, really appreciate you guys. And thanks for joining in. And hopefully talk to you here shortly.